You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life, but who bonded over the worst people in history.
Yeah, that's right. And this week is no different. This terrible, terrible people. Before we get started, of course, we would like to send a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You quite literally keep this show going, from research time to hosting the many, 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 many books piled on our nightstands.
So many books.
I know. We are just so endlessly grateful for you. Thank you all. We hope you had a great holiday during our break. And we're just really glad that you're all back here with us. We'd like to give, of course, as always, a special shout out to our newest Patreon members. They are Tarina Bowden, thank you very, very much. Genevieve, thank you. Erin, thank you very much. JDH, thank you very much. Catherine Blessing, thank you. We really appreciate you. And Kira, I think that hopefully is it. Thanks, Kira. So that's great. That's our newest members that we received while we were on break. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And what might be interesting to our murder tier members, the new Fresh Health thingy was sent out to you guys this week. So keep your eyes on your mailbox in the upcoming weeks. It always takes a while to go from Austria to the US. And now with, there's a lot going on with the
world.
Yeah, and importing things from outside the US and all that. So we're trying our best. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, listen, the world is a dumpster fire. We're just here trying to bring you horrible news of a non-current affairs situation. You got the news for that.
So you can go like, okay, it's always been like this.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to know more about Patreon or all of the other logistics, please wait until the end of the episode. That's when we'll tell you all about that. Now it's time to jump right into today's episode. Johanna had the idea for this one, and after she told me a little bit about the who's, what's, and whys, I was on board because this is terrible. Johanna, what are we talking about today and next week? Because it's too much awful things to fit into one.
It's too much
episode. Yeah, we gotta.
And we're already condensing it down a lot, obviously. So, this all started with me sitting in a theater watching the musical Maria Theresia. I think I talked about it at the time. And in that musical, Friedrich of Prussia is the arch nemesis. And he's very cold and calculating and militaristic. So the perfect foil to Maria Theresia, who, at least in Austrian cultural memory, is very maternal, resilient, and she's attacked by a pack of real mean, ambitious men. And sitting there, I'm nodding along. Yeah, that's great. That's good. And I suddenly thought, wait, how much do I actually know about Friedrich of Prussia? Beyond the little teeny tiny basic version that we're taught in school and kind of dislike in Austria. Because in Austria, obviously, Friedrich II of Prussia, Frederick the Great, he's not a neutral historical figure. He's the guy who humiliated the Habsburgs and who challenged Maria Theresia's legitimacy. And he took Silesia and never gave it back to us. It was one of our most wealthy districts of the Habsburg Empire.
That's right.
So, thank you for that.
Mine.
In school, you learn the basics. He's this enlightened, but also kind of despotic ruler, a great general. He plays the flute. He's a philosopher. He's a king. But what else do I know, right? He's an enemy, the Prussian king. And you're not supposed to sympathize with him as an Austrian.
Do Prussians have feelings? I thought that was... Is that...
Yeah, do Prussians even have feelings? Well, we're gonna find out.
I'm joking. You know what? You know why I said that? It brings me... The last time I really remember discussing Prussia is our very, very first episode because the killer in Smutty Nose was Prussian.
Yeah. And also, I think we talked about Prussia with the Hauptmann of Köpenick. You remember
That's
the one
right.
who was
Yes.
pretending to be, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I realized the other day? And I'm getting more and more certain that one of these days we're going to sit down to record and you're going to say, what are we talking about today? And I tell you something that we've already done. Because
100%. I think it's going to happen one of these days.
Yeah, I really realized it with if I'm having like migraine symptoms while Paul and I are watching something, I don't retain anything. It's like it never happened. And so, yeah, beware.
I'm telling you, when I picked the cases for this compilation Best of Fresh Hell, like we did over the holidays, yeah, I go through our scripts and I'm like, oh, we did that.
I know.
Wait, we covered that. I'm like, it was a surprise.
It's true.
Well,
it's true. Yeah.
So, back to Friedrich of Prussia. What I did, because I was like, okay, I just know the basics. Over the holidays, I sat down and I started reading books about him. And 2 books really kicked this whole thing off for me. And I want to stress these are historical novels. It's not nonfiction, but they are based on really thorough research. You're moving through the real historical events and the real people. It's just very immersive, right?
Yes.
It's an easy way to approach it.
Historical fiction like that is good, especially when you have an author that's really done the work. So
Exactly.
Right. I totally know what you mean.
Yeah. And so these 2 books are both by Cornelia Wusowski. The first one is called Friedrich der Große, der ungeliebte Sohn, which is Friedrich the Great, the unloved son. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's it looks at the boy behind the legend. He's trapped between these expectations and fear and everything we're going to talk about today. And then the second one is the einsame König, so the lonely king. And that's the book that follows him into power. And together, those 2 novels made him feel less like this, cardboard Prussian enemy of Austria and more like a very complex human being. And he's shaped by a lot of violence and repression and survival. And I think that's basically catnip for this podcast. So you're all coming into our alleyway now. And I was like, okay, that feels really like a Fresh Hell story. And by the end of these 2 episodes, hopefully just 2, you might agree with us. Or you'll think, snore, this was such a waste of time.
I don't think anybody is going to think this is a waste of time. This is, yeah, it's rough. And to be clear, we're not basing these episodes on these novels that Johanna read, right? So those got her into looking more into this, but everything that we're talking about today is grounded in historical sources, letters, documented events. If you enjoy this story, then we'd recommend reading these fictionalized accounts because that's kind of fun, but unfortunately, fiction doesn't research for us. Now, before we talk about Friedrich II, we need to talk about his father. And before we talk about his father, we need to talk about Prussia, because neither of them really make any sense without it, right? We should also mention that this episode is going to contain some pretty rough child abuse. So the version of Prussia most of us carry around in our heads is the one with military parades, iron discipline. That Prussia does not yet exist. At the beginning of the 18th century, Prussia is not impressive and it's not powerful. And it is also very much aware that it is neither impressive nor powerful. Friedrich Wilhelm I, so that's Friedrich II's father, when he came to the throne in 1713, he inherited a state that was awkward in almost every possible way. Prussia was not one compact territory. It was scattered. Brandenburg here, East Prussia over there. There were bits and pieces in between that were separated by other people's land. Geographically, Prussia sat in an uncomfortable position. It had no natural borders to speak of, no mountains to hide behind, no oceans to protect it. It was flat, exposed, and surrounded by neighbors who were stronger, richer, or more prestigious. To the south, the Habsburgs ruled a sprawling empire. To the west, France dominated European politics and culture. To the north and east, Sweden and Poland-Lithuania were still serious players. Population-wise, Prussia was small, around 2.5 million people in total, which sounds like a lot until you remember that France had roughly 8 times that number. Prussia was not a demographic heavyweight, and economically, Prussia was not thriving. There was agriculture, of course, but little in the way of major trade hubs or luxury industries. No Paris, no Vienna, no London, no court that people dreamed of visiting. So Prussia compensated. It compensated with administration, with discipline, and above all, with the army. Friedrich Wilhelm looked at his state and saw something fragile, something that could be carved up or ignored. And his response was not to make Prussia lovable or cultured or diplomatically clever. His response was to make it unavoidable. By the time he was done, Prussia had one of the largest standing armies in Europe relative to its population. Not because it could afford one easily, spoiler alert, it often couldn't, but because Friedrich Wilhelm believed that survival depended on being permanently ready for war. The Prussian economy was reorganized to support the military. State finances were run with an almost pathological focus on efficiency. Money was saved, hoarded, and redirected. Waste and laziness was basically a moral failure. Luxury was suspect. If something didn't directly contribute to the strength or stability of the state, Friedrich Wilhelm saw little reason for it to exist.
I read a funny story, and I'm sorry, I have to check if that's actually a law. I couldn't find anything, but I read that he established a law. That's what I read. I have to double check. He established a law that said that when, for example, women were, the women selling at the markets, and if they had no customers, they were supposed to knit or crochet or do any of these things because they shouldn't be just idly sitting around and doing nothing. They should always have to do something. So that's the mindset he had for Prussia.
Oh my goodness. It sounds like he has ADHD and wants everyone else to have it too. Like, listen, man, just because you can't sit still for 5 seconds, can we just... Oh, it's exhausting.
It was so funny because I talked to my husband about it and told him all these stories about, Friedrich and thing. And he was like, isn't it crazy to think about? Imagine he would kind of come into our house today and you say like, you know what, just, let's sit on the couch or lie in bed the whole day and binge watch. And he would be like, lie in bed? Why? Am I sick? Am I dying? What's going on?
That's my father. Yeah. My dad is like, we don't watch television in the daytime. Like, television is a evening thing after work.
Yeah.
It makes him real twitchy to watch TV during the day.
So to really grasp just how extreme Friedrich Wilhelm I's frugality was, it helps to look at what Europe's gold standard for kingship was doing at the exact same time. So I think let's glance over at France. When Friedrich Wilhelm took the Prussian throne in 1713, as Annie said, Louis XIV was still alive. And yeah, he was old, he was exhausted, and he was presiding over a country drained by war. But nonetheless, he was still very much the Sun King. And Versailles was fully operational, and keeping it running was so expensive, like insanely expensive. Historians estimate that at various points during Louis XIV's reign, up to 1/4 of France's annual state revenue was tied directly or indirectly to sustaining the royal court and the lifestyle. Not war, not famine relief, court life, 1/4 of the state revenue. Can you imagine?
Mm-mm.
France's total income at the time ran well into the hundreds of millions of livres per year, which means we're talking about tens of millions spent on ceremonies, clothing, household staff, banquets, fountains, music, theater, and this constant performance of royal magnificence. Versailles alone cost around 25 million livres to build and expand over time. And that's before you factor in all the daily maintenance, the salaries, and the sheer scale of people living off the court. Like, this is an industry we're talking about. Power in France, looked like abundance, and it was an absolute spectacle. And we all know how that's gonna end. Like, people are not happy about that.
And it's this weird thing too, isn't it? Because it's like this self-sustaining economy that can only survive as long as you've got the funds to keep. You employ so many people. It's just hard for us all to imagine, isn't it? And it's hard to, like, this level of excess. And you can imagine the industries that are then built up around this, right? Because when you live somewhere like Versailles, you need craftspeople. You need this constant staff of, like, really highly skilled professionals in a way, don't you?
100%, yeah. They're not just, I mean, it's not some Bauhaus.
That's right. That's it. It's not like my IKEA. Yeah. Welcome to my home. Yeah.
And thank God, because now we have beautiful things to look at. Like,
it's so true.
I'm not complaining. And then there's Prussia, right? And so we have France here, and they're pouring money into these gilded mirrors and gardens and operas and silk and this high hair and tiny shoes. And in Prussia, Friedrich Wilhelm I was doing the exact opposite with almost aggressive determination. Like, he slashed court expenses wherever he could. He reduced ceremonies to the bare minimum. He mocked fashionable clothing. He banned all the unnecessary luxuries. And he made a point of dressing plainly himself, which makes him kind of... I sympathize with that, because he was at least one of the rulers who was not like, rules for you, but not for me.
That's right.
He lived like that.
We're all going to be miserable.
Yeah. So he hoards the money and he redirects it. Comfort, we don't need it. Candles, firewood, imported cheese is all humbug.
Not the cheese. Oh, no.
France spends fortunes on art, and Friedrich Wilhelm kind of shut down court entertainment.
Slamming doors on jugglers everywhere. Absolutely not.
Yeah, there's no court jester.
No.
No. We're not gonna laugh at all.
No.
Life is not funny, people.
It's not.
And France is investing in music and theater, and Prussia is investing in drill manuals. And this wasn't because Prussia couldn't imagine luxury. They could. Former kings could. They tried. But it was because Friedrich Wilhelm actively rejected it. He believed that extravagance weakened states, softened people, and distracted rulers from what actually kept them alive. Music, theater, philosophy, intellectual salons, all the things that were associated with 18th century Enlightenment culture, fancy enlightened people sitting around talking about stuff. These, in his eyes, were unnecessary distractions. And at best, they were just frivolous. At worst, they made people really soft and weak. And Friedrich Wilhelm did not want soft, weak, or difficult people. He wanted to have obedient and efficient people.
Yeah. And over the next episodes, you're going to hear a lot of things about Friedrich Wilhelm, mostly very ugly, violent, and frankly hard to listen to things. But if we're going to do this properly, we also have to be fair and talk about some of the good things that he did. We see this all the time in history, don't we? Nobody's perfect. Everybody is problematic to some degree, some way more problematic than others. But he did some good things here. So one of them, and one of the big ones, especially for the time, this is incredibly progressive, was religious tolerance. Prussia under Friedrich Wilhelm I was, by the early 18th century standards, unusually open. Protestants of different denominations, Catholics, Jews, and refugees, including Huguenots fleeing persecution in France, were all allowed to settle and practice their own faith. This wasn't purely altruistic, of course. Friedrich Wilhelm believed that productive, disciplined people strengthened the state regardless of their religion. He was also an extremely capable administrator. State finances were stabilized, corruption was curbed, the bureaucracy became more efficient. Prussia became solvent, organized, and functional. Later generations would praise him for laying the groundwork that made Prussia a serious power at all.
If you want to know more about the very, very complex character of Friedrich Wilhelm I of Prussia, I can recommend the book Der Vater, so The Father, by Jochen Klepper. And another thing I want to mention, Friedrich Wilhelm was weirdly obsessed with height, mainly the height of his elite soldiers. And have you ever heard about the Lange Kerls?
I have not.
Friedrich Wilhelm had an obsession with very tall soldiers. And I have to admit, he didn't create what's officially called Altpreußische Infanterieregiment No. 6, but he made it his personal Royal Guard regiment, an elite regiment made up of exceptionally tall men. Some recruited normally, others effectively coerced, gifted, or even kidnapped from across Europe. It's a little bit like with, when people were kidnapped to work on ships, these kind of things. You're tall, we're going to just put you in the bag and carry you to Prussia.
That's
big bag.
That's a very long bag. Wow.
Lange Kerls, by the way, just means tall guys. Long guys. So yeah, these men then were expensively outfitted, meticulously maintained, and rarely used in actual combat. They were mostly there to be displayed and admired.
Yeah, they're that's such a bizarre.
I even heard that he had kind of life-size portraits drawn of them to exhibit.
I love it.
And they were not just, tall for their time. No, they were exceptionally tall, even by modern standards. So the official minimum height for the regiment was about 6 Prussian feet, which translates to roughly 188 centimeters, or about 6'2". But many of the men were even taller than that. Some were over 190 centimeters, and a handful were reported at more than 2 meters tall. And that's in early 18th century Europe, where the average man stood somewhere around 5'5". That's tall, right?
Yeah.
And here comes my favorite fun fact of this whole thing. Friedrich Wilhelm had a friendly but very particular relationship with Peter the Great of Russia, another ruler with an interest in, scale, bodies, spectacle. In 1716, Friedrich Wilhelm gifted Peter the Great something spectacular. Can you guess what it is? A tall guy. No, it was the Amber Room. The Amber Room. You know, that entire room decorated with amber and panels and mirrors and gold leaf. This was a diplomatic gift. But it was also a transaction. Because in return, Peter sent Friedrich Wilhelm what he knew the Prussian king valued most, very tall soldiers.
So you are tallest men.
Several exceptionally tall grenadiers were dispatched from Russia to Prussia, specifically for the Lange Kerls, and they were absorbed into the Potsdam regiment and became part of, this prized collection of tall guys.
It's just amazing. So he traded the Amber Room for some tall men. I did not know that's how it came to Russia.
Yeah. It was originally commissioned in Prussia during the reign of Friedrich I, so that's Friedrich Wilhelm's father, which shows Prussian kings did know how to spend money and how to impress.
They just chose not to. It was a conscious decision.
Friedrich I was the exact opposite of his son. He loved the spectacle and art and ceremony and expensive displays of power. And the Amber Room was designed for Berlin as a showpiece, this glittering expression of royal prestige and made of these amber panels and the gold and the intricate carvings. In other words, it was everything Friedrich Wilhelm I absolutely despised. And when Friedrich Wilhelm came to the throne, he inherited this super extravagant, high-maintenance artwork. How do you even take care of amber? Like, do you have to just kind of polish it every other week? Yeah.
I mean, just dust it. It's fine.
But he had absolutely no use for it, and it sat there. It was so valuable, but to him it was useless.
I mean, that's kind of all beautiful things. If you don't find any use in beauty, then. But I get it.
And that's where Friedrich Wilhelm really shows how frugal and how pragmatic he was. Because then when he developed this close relationship with the Russian Tsar, he saw an opportunity because the Tsar loved Western European art and craftsmanship, and Friedrich Wilhelm loved tall men. And so he was like, you know what? I can get rid of this object I do not like or need. I gonna get some tall men for it, and I'm gonna have a great relationship with the Russian Tsar. And the biggest part of it, he didn't have to spend any money of it. And that's peak Soldier King logic, because that was his nickname, the Soldier King.
Love it.
Isn't that the best fun fact
it is.
you're gonna hear in this episode?
No, it really is.
So then the Amber Room was sent to Russia, it was installed, and it became famous. It was expanded and reworked, and then it was eventually installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, where it was often called, the eighth wonder of the world. And then, of course, the real mystery begins during World War II, because then Nazi Germany invades the Soviet Union. German forces dismantled the Amber Room and transported it to Königsberg, which is today's Kaliningrad. And after that, vanished. Trail goes cold. It may have been destroyed during bombing. It may have been dismantled and hidden. It may have been lost in transit. There is no definite proof of whatever happened to it. And I think that uncertainty, combined with its absolute beauty, turned the Amber Room in one of these great lost art legends of the 20th century.
Definitely. There's a book about it by, is it Steve Berry? Similar to Dan Brown's Angels and Demons books, that kind of vibe of like a historian on the hunt for lost treasure. There's an Amber Room book.
I want to know what happened to it. You think we're ever going to find out? Probably some Nazi heir.
I was going to say
generation is sitting in his living room right now, and
it's somebody in Argentina. It's like some
Argentina, Brazil, someplace there.
It's a closet. It's a walking closet in Argentina is the Amber Room. It's got to be, right? Like, I feel like all of that stuff was hidden by the Nazis, was all secreted away places. I hope it still exists for the sake of...
I think it does somewhere.
Yeah, I think it is it's like someone's walk-in closet, like someone in Dubai or it's like some billionaire's really rando thing.
Yeah.
And like people come over and they're like, wow, this is wild. And he's like, I know, I heard about this Amber Room. So I designed it to be like kind of vibe like that, but it is the actual Amber Room and no one knows.
Probably Bezos has it.
Probably.
As his guest bathroom. No, and the last thing I'm going to say about the tall guys, the Lange Kerls, as I said, they were barely used in battle. They were just constantly drilled and it was super. That's where he spent money. It was expensive to maintain this elite group, but they were largely ceremonial, and Friedrich Wilhelm just liked to watch them march.
I bet he did.
He liked to line them up. I imagine him like other little boys play with the tin soldiers or something like that. Yeah, he had real ones. He loved to be surrounded by them. Contemporary sources describing him being visibly more relaxed when he's surrounded by the tall guys.
Oh, I feel the same way. But I think that's nice. Listen, if I had an entire performative, military of tall soldiers, I would like to watch them march too. So this man, with his love of the tall soldiers, he's pretty quickly nicknamed the Soldier King. And yes, there is a side of Friedrich Wilhelm I that historians have admired, a ruler who was efficient, pragmatic, religiously tolerant, and deeply committed to what he believed would keep his state alive, which is his job, right? That's your divine purpose. None of these qualities would make him a good father. In fact, many of the traits that made him effective as a ruler, his obsession with discipline, his intolerance for deviation, his belief that fear was a legitimate tool, are exactly what made life inside his household so devastating. He was volatile, he was loud and profane and very unpredictable. He drank heavily, he flew into rages. He could be generous and almost jovial one moment, and then terrifying the next. He beat soldiers and servants personally. He didn't, back then, you wouldn't do that. You would have them beaten.
You have somebody who beats servants for you.
That's right. So you don't hurt your hand or bruise your knuckles. No, he enjoyed beating people. He humiliated courtiers. He involved himself obsessively in the details, the inspections. He was a micromanager. And
he's a total micromanager. He even knew he knew the daily or weekly prices at the market for eggs or milk or cheese or whatever. He knew exactly what things cost.
It's so, for some reason, all of a sudden I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about President Garfield again.
Yeah, but he's the light and this one is the dark
That's
side
what I'm
of
saying.
this kind
it's
of,
like what happens when you use this kind of, because obviously he was a very intelligent person, but he's just using all of everything he has, he's using it for evil. He's Well, he wouldn't see it that way, but I think we can all see it that way. And that's the thing, right? Like, for him, in his mind, Prussia exists in this very, very dangerous world. It couldn't afford softness, it couldn't afford indulgence, and it definitely could not afford any kind of weakness, especially in its future rulers. And like we were just saying, to him, harshness wasn't cruelty, it was necessary preparation. It's like parents today who say like, well, life is hard, so, and they excuse, and that's what we talk about. I think at this point, everybody is familiar with like cycles of abuse and patterns of abuse and that kind of thing. But part of it in this case is true, and part of it is not. For him, it wasn't cruelty. It was necessary preparation, and that belief did not stop at the border of the state. Friedrich Wilhelm did not draw a line between public and private life. So from the very beginning, family life at the Prussian court was shaped by the same principles as the army: control, obedience, and suspicion of anything that looked like excess. Sons, in particular, were expected to embody the Prussian ideal. Masculinity was rigidly defined. Strength, endurance, emotional restraint. These were not just virtues, they were requirements. Deviating from that model was absolutely not acceptable. And that is the world that Friedrich II was born into.
So Friedrich Wilhelm's wife was Sophie Dorothea of Hanover, and she came from a completely different world. She was born into the Hanoverian dynasty, and her family was closely tied to England. I really quickly also want to tell you about Friedrich II's maternal grandmother, so Sophie Dorothea von Zelle. And her story, I promise, is absolutely worth a very short side tangent, and it also adds another, generational layer of fear and confinement and punishment for wrong behavior there. Sophie Dorothea of Zelle, she was the wife of Georg Ludwig von Hanover, who at the time was still Elector of Hanover, but who would become King George I of England eventually. I don't want to talk about him. I want to talk about his wife, Sophie Dorothea, because her marriage to George was miserable almost from the start. It was a political match, emotionally cold and full of mutual resentment. George openly kept mistresses and treated his wife with utter contempt. Sophie Dorothea, she was isolated and humiliated, but she eventually entered a relationship with a Swedish count, Philipp Christoph von Königsmarck. And in 1694, Königsmarck disappeared. What happened to him? Well, he was almost certainly murdered, even though that could never be proven, and he's still considered only missing. His body was never officially recovered, but the consensus among historians is that he was killed either on George's orders or at least with his approval. And Sophie Dorothea, well, she was accused of adultery, her marriage was dissolved, and she was imprisoned for life at Alden House, and she was kept under guard, cut off from court, and forbidden from seeing her children ever again. Like, ever. She spent over 30 years confined there until her death in 1726. Her children included future King of England George II and Sophie Dorothea of Hanover, who would become the Prussian queen and Friedrich II's mother. So just kind of let that sink in for a moment. Friedrich's mother grew up knowing that her own mother had been imprisoned for having a lover, and that adultery in royal marriage was not just a scandal, it was treason. It meant at best a life sentence. And disobedience, especially by women, could be punished with erasure. And I think this explains a lot about Sophie Dorothea of Hanover and her behavior later on. She's always kind of considered to be absent from Friedrich II's life. Like she's kind of this background figure. I think she was a very cautious woman. She never openly defied her husband. And she had a fear of, I think, crossing certain lines because she knew exactly what could happen to a queen who kind of went too far.
That's right. And I wouldn't be surprised also, just because we don't have letters or anything written down anywhere, it would make sense, to me at least, that there would have been conversations in which he let his wife know that her involvement was not necessary or appreciated, or just kept her away because it was up to him at the end of the day. He could just say, you're going to be over here at this other estate and we're not going to be there. And that was that.
Yeah. That's what I think. I think she's often kind of considered this she was not an interested mother, but I think
it's not a fair portrayal.
A bit of a harsh,
that's
exactly.
Right. Because it assumes that she had a choice in anything at that time, which women, you've all listened to this podcast enough to know that,
The one thing I have to say from all I know is that Friedrich Wilhelm was very much in love and devoted to his wife. I mean, there were mistresses, of course, but just because he was devoted to his wife doesn't mean he kind of was interested in her opinion or her
absolutely
influence in anything of stately manners.
No. Sophie Dorothea and Friedrich Wilhelm were married in 1706 when he was still a crown prince. From a political standpoint, the match made sense. With her family on the rise, with strong Protestant credentials and increasingly important connections to England, Prussia, for its part, needed legitimacy, allies, and international relevance. On paper, it was a solid match. In practice, it was a disaster. The two could not have been more different. Friedrich Wilhelm, you've already heard, was coarse, volatile, aggressively anti-luxury, and deeply suspicious of anything he considered foreign or soft. Sophie Dorothea had been raised in a court culture that valued conversation, education, music, and social graces. She spoke French fluently. She cared about appearances. She believed court life could and should involve more than permanent discipline. From the start, they irritated each other. Sophie Dorothea found the Prussian court suffocating. She disliked its austerity, its lack of luxury and ceremony, its contempt for refinement. She missed music, conversation, and a sense of social grace. She just believed that court life could be something other than a permanent, constant military inspection. Their first child was Friedrich Ludwig, born in 1707. He died in infancy. We know that it was something tragically common at the time, but it was still just as devastating. A second son followed in 1708, and he too died young. These early losses mattered more than we sometimes acknowledge because they intensified Friedrich Wilhelm's obsession with producing a strong, surviving male heir. In 1709, Sophie Dorothea gave birth to a daughter, Friederike Sophie Wilhelmine, mostly referred to in history as Wilhelmina. She would survive, and she would matter enormously. Wilhelmina was intelligent, perceptive, and emotionally attuned to the tensions in her parents' marriage. She would later become one of the most important witnesses to what life inside this household was actually like. 3 years later, in 1712, the long-awaited surviving son was born, Friedrich, the future Friedrich II of Prussia. This was the child everything hinged on. For Friedrich Wilhelm, this son was the future of the Prussian project. And of course, high expectations attached themselves to the child immediately. He was to be raised as a soldier, drilled early, stripped of softness before it could take root. For Sophie Dorothea, this son was something else entirely. He was fragile, observant, and emotionally receptive. More children followed, daughters and sons, some of whom survived, others who did not. But the emotional core of the family had already formed. Wilhelmina and Friedrich, close in age, grew up side by side in a household that oscillated between rigid control and sudden violence. They shared tutors, music, books, and crucially, a sense that they were fundamentally different from what their father wanted them to be.
So Sophie Dorothea was particularly close to her eldest son Friedrich and to her daughter Wilhelmine, and from very early on I think she could see what her husband either couldn't or wouldn't see, and that was that Friedrich was just not cut from the same cloth as his father. But we're not quite there yet. For now, let's just say, and we already told you, Friedrich Wilhelm despises everything his wife represents, And he distrusted her family ties and resented her attempts to shape the children differently. Over time, he increasingly sidelined her, mocked her, treated her opinions as not just wrong, but dangerous. Sophie Dorothea, for her part, had very little real power. She appears in the historical records as I said, this surprisingly absent figure. I think she could advise and would comfort. She would write letters. But she could just not stop her husband's rages, or she could not shield her children from the authority or from the violence. And in moments of extreme conflict, she was kind of pushed out of the room, I think sometimes even literally, while punishments were carried out. I think we made it quite obvious so far that Friedrich was not the son his father wanted. As a small child, he was physically slight and often very sickly. He wasn't robust, loud, or naturally drawn to rough play. I remember reading that he loved to stay inside, reading books, and his father would say, no, go outside and beat up this boy or that boy. That was play for him. You have to go and beat up other children.
I was going to say, that sounds like my childhood until the beating up part. Why are you sitting inside? It's beautiful out. Go outside. But I'm reading inside. I'm near a window. I can see it's nice out there.
So Friedrich, he was very observant. He was quiet. He was careful. He definitely listened more than he spoke. I think that's also normal if you grow up in a household where you're never sure or certain what's the mood today.
That's right.
His daily routine was regimented almost from infancy. He was expected to wake up early, follow strict schedules, and submit to authority without question. There was very little room for comfort or spontaneity or artistry. Childhood as this kind of protected space did not exist. What Friedrich gravitated toward instead were things his father actively despised. He loved music. Friedrich loved music. He had a natural ear for it, and he started to learn the flute. And he kind of took to it with real enthusiasm. He also enjoyed reading. He loved to learn about history and literature. He was not so great at math, one of the subjects his father valued most, because he said that's a ruler, a king, has to be able to calculate, which is not wrong.
No,
I mean, he's right.
That's why I didn't become one.
Young Friedrich was gifted with an ease for languages, and he became quickly fluent in French, which in most European courts would have been a mark of refinement. In Prussia, under Friedrich Wilhelm, it was kind of provocation, because French culture was everything the soldier king loathed. And then he's watching his son lean instinctively toward the world that he hated. This is kind of, personal betrayal in a way. And obviously that needs to be punished, and the evil has to be kind of pulled out by the root. Friedrich was mocked for his interests. His books were taken away. His musical instruments were confiscated or sometimes smashed. He was often publicly humiliated in front of officers or courtiers. His father ridiculed his voice, his posture, his mannerism. He said Friedrich is not manly, he's more like a little girl, he's acting girlish. Anything that could be interpreted as insufficiently masculine was targeted.
And then the punishments escalated. Beatings were not rare. They were sudden, unpredictable, and often public. And worst of all, Friedrich never knew what version of his father he'd encounter. The joking, almost affable king, or the furious disciplinarian who saw disobedience everywhere. So he was basically always on edge.
Yeah.
This unpredictability taught Friedrich to read rooms obsessively, to anticipate moods, to hide parts of himself before they could be used against him. He learned early that safety depended on performance, on appearing obedient, while privately retreating to an inner world where his father couldn't reach him. But he had one person in his life who knew the real him, the artistic, sensitive Friedrich, and his older sister, Wilhelmine. She shared Friedrich's interests, his love of music and books, his sense of being fundamentally mismatched to their environment. They spent hours together, reading, playing music, whispering, and writing notes to each other. They became each other's safest confidants. As Friedrich grew older, the pressure intensified. His father began insisting on military training in earnest. Drill, weapons handling, inspections, all things Friedrich performed badly at, not because he was incapable, but because he absolutely hated them. Of course, his reluctance only enraged his father further. So Friedrich learned more and more to hide his own nature. There was a version of him his father saw, stiff, silent, obedient, fearful. And then there was the private Friedrich, the one who read forbidden books, composed music, and dreamed of a life elsewhere, anywhere else. What Friedrich had to endure was nearly 20 years of continuous pressure, physical violence, and psychological humiliation. A childhood and adolescence shaped by what can only be described as sustained abuse. And it left damages that followed him for the rest of his life. The king, as we said, never hesitated to beat his son. Sometimes privately, but often publicly. Officers, servants, tutors, witnesses were common. One tutor who practiced Latin with Friedrich was personally beaten by the king. And then Friedrich, who was hiding under the table, was next. This is Friedrich's own account of this incident. Quote, "I trembled even more. He grabbed me by the hair, dragged me out from under the table, hauled me into the middle of the room, and finally struck me several times across the face, saying, 'Come at me again with your mensa, and you'll see how I set your head straight.'" End quote.
I think the hair grabbing and pulling him through the room by his hair was a common occurrence. Like, that is mentioned several times.
Awful. At a military maneuver in electoral Saxony in 1728, his father beat him with a cane so severely that he was left bleeding, and once again in full view of others. Physical violence and psychological humiliation went hand in hand most of the time. In another confrontation from his youth, Friedrich Wilhelm beat his son in front of the assembled household and screamed at him that he himself would have shot himself if he had been treated this way, accusing Friedrich of cowardice for enduring the abuse his father was giving him rather than killing himself.
Can you even imagine your own father telling you this?
No. This is such a horrifying level of abuse, and it's so hard to it's not hard to imagine today. Obviously, abuse like this still happens everywhere. Yeah. What's hard to imagine today is something like this happening in front of a full room of people, because today you'd have to hide that shit, right? Like today, you couldn't, in public at least, get away with it so much.
Also, I think we never think about these people, like these kings or emperors or princesses being treated like this.
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah. And people think it's all sunshine and roses, I think.
Yeah.
Like all they see is powers and palaces and jewels and, all the things that these people have. Yeah. So at the age of 17, Friedrich wrote to his beloved sister Wilhelmine, and he wrote, quote, "I am in the deepest despair. The king has completely forgotten that I am his son. This morning I entered his room as usual. No sooner had he seen me than he seized me by the collar and struck me in the most brutal way with his cane. I tried in vain to defend myself. He was in such a terrible rage that he could no longer control himself, and he only stopped when his arm grew tired from exhaustion." End quote.
Just because he entered the room.
That's it. Friedrich even attempted to appeal directly to his father in writing, hoping to distance himself from what he called the, quote, cruel hatred he perceived in all of the king's actions. The reply he received made his father's expectations unmistakably clear. Love meant total obedience.
Now, we told you that Friedrich's only confidant was his sister Wilhelmine, but that changed in the late 1720s when Friedrich was a young man, because that's when he met Hans Hermann von Katte, who would play a very important role in Friedrich's life. Katte was born on 21st of February 1704 in Berlin into an old Altmark noble family. His father Hans Heinrich von Katte was cuirassier colonel and a favored officer of King Friedrich I. His mother, a member of the distinguished von Wartensleben family, and daughter of Field Marshal Alexander Graf von Wartensleben, died when Hans Hermann was just 3 years old. His upbringing reflected the ambitions of a family firmly embedded in Prussian elite circles. Katte spent his school years in Königsberg, where his father had been transferred to, and he quickly stood out as very gifted, was a very smart, intelligent boy. So much so that he was not initially destined for a military career at all. Instead, he was steered toward a civilian future, and he was sent to study law in Königsberg and later in Utrecht. Extended travels completed his education, giving him something very rare in Prussia at the time, which was a Polish, confident sense of the wider world. Like he could move in international noble circles, let's say it like this. And I think in any other country that might have been the end of it, but Prussia under Friedrich Wilhelm I was not kind to men whose talents did lie outside rigid military usefulness. And so, very likely at the king's insistence and against his own wishes, Katte was pressed into military service, and he joined the Cuirassier Regiment Gendarme, so the armed men, which was also a very prestigious unit, and crucially the same one in which the Crown Prince of Prussia, the future Friedrich II, served. And that would change his life forever. Now, it's not exactly clear when Katte and Friedrich first met, but what we do know is that by 1729, they were attending private instructions together in mathematics, mechanics, and engineering, and they quickly formed a bond. Friedrich, who was increasingly isolated as his father had removed or reassigned anyone who grew close to him, found in Katte something he had been denied for years, which was an equal who neither mocked nor punished him. Katte was 8 years older, he was worldlier, he was more confident. Friedrich admired how easily he was kind of moving through social circles without fear. You know, he was able to speak in front of other people, he was able to joke and to kind of express his thoughts. These were all things that were beaten out of Friedrich in a way. They shared interest in music, especially flute playing, and in poetry, and contemporaries noticed how close they were. Karl Ludwig von Pöllnitz, who was a courtier, adventurer, and a professional gossip with a very sharp pen, for example, later remarked that the two behaved, quote, like a lover with his beloved, end quote. And also Wilhelmine had her thoughts about Katte. In her memoirs, she offers a deeply ambivalent portrait of Katte. She acknowledges his intelligence, education, his, how polished he was. She describes him as very witty, well-read, and socially refined, but she also paints him as very vain, reckless, and indulgent. Also, he was kind of bragging about his connection with Friedrich, with the crown prince, to other people. She notes that his ambition, his successes, and his overconfidence, and she is unsparing in her physical description, portraying him as outwardly very unattractive with a gaze she found unsettling, even ominous. And she was watching her brother, who was already under constant scrutiny, attach himself to this man who was very talkative and not very discreet. And from her perspective, Katte was not a stabilizing influence. She thought that Katte was dangerous for her brother. Friedrich and Katte's relationship unfolded in a court where privacy was very scarce and there was constant surveillance. And they talked and they read together and they exchanged letters, they played music. And to Friedrich, who had learned that affection always came with conditions, Katte represented something completely different, which meant he was loyal without being violent.
Historians are careful with labels, and so should we be. But I think at this point, the question is almost inevitable. Were Friedrich and Hans Hermann von Katte lovers? The honest answer is, we don't know, and we probably never will. There is no surviving letter in which Friedrich explicitly describes a relationship with Katte. There's no confession, no diary entry, no document that spells it out in terms modern readers would recognize as unambiguous proof, right? This isn't a situation where they were roommates for 20 years. It's hard to know. It's possible. It's very possible that they were in love with each other. But it's also very possible they just loved each other deeply. And Absence of proof is an absence of meaning. What we do have is a pattern, and it's a pattern that contemporaries noticed immediately. We know that Friedrich's attachment to Katte was intense. It was exclusive and emotionally charged. We know that Katte became Friedrich's closest confidant at a time when his father had deliberately isolated him by removing or reassigning previous companions. We know they spent significant time together, shared intellectual and artistic interests, took private lessons together, and wrote to one another. We also know that observers at court found their closeness remarkable. And maybe when Wilhelmina writes about the fact that she worried about Katte being dangerous maybe for her brother, maybe she was worried that they could be exposed as lovers, but we just don't know. Equally, all of these things could be used to describe my relationship with my best female friends,
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a tough one. One aspect that is kind of interesting is, of course, there's the broader context of Friedrich's life to consider. It would be wrong to say that Friedrich showed no romantic interest in women at all during his youth. As a young man, Friedrich was briefly involved in marriage plans with Amelie von Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel, but those plans ultimately went nowhere. They do suggest at least an outward participation in the expected script of dynastic masculinity.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that he was actually interested in her. It could have been hey, we found the person you're going to marry, this is her. Here you go.
First of all, and second, it was kind of what is expected, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Around the same time, Friedrich famously commissioned a portrait of Anna Karolina Orzelska, the acknowledged daughter of Augustus the Strong. He admired her beauty, and his interest appears genuine, or at least sincerely performed. But these instances don't tell us what Friedrich felt so much as what he understood was expected of him, right? By this point in life, he had learned, often very violently, that failing to perform masculinity correctly had consequences. Showing interest in women was safe and expected. That said, it doesn't mean these gestures were fake. It just means they existed within constraint.
Yeah. There's lots of layers to all of this.
It is. Yeah, there's at the end of the day, there's nothing that conclusively points to any genuine romantic interest from Friedrich to anybody else. But what's for sure is that Friedrich's interest in Katte was different, more intense, and maybe that was just due to the fact that this is the first time he felt like he had a real friend. Whatever it was, it definitely involved a deep attachment. In the end, whether Friedrich and Katte were lovers in a physical sense is probably not that important. What matters more is that Katte was the person Friedrich loved most deeply at that point in his life, which would make the loss of that relationship and the way it was taken from him traumatic enough to influence how Friedrich related to people forever after. And in the end, that might be the most historically honest position to take.
I agree. And it's going to be so traumatic.
Yeah.
That much I can tell you already. So yeah, we don't know exactly what happened between them behind closed doors. Whatever happened, it did matter. And we know it mattered enough to destroy 2 lives. What matters here is not whether their relationship fits a modern category, but what matters is that Katte was emotionally indispensable for Friedrich, and that apparently a lot of people, or almost everyone around them, could see it. And I guess including Friedrich Wilhelm. By the time Friedrich was about 17 or 18, he realized that this wasn't going to stop. That there was no point at which his father was going to say, you know, you learned your lessons, you're great now the way you are, I taught you everything, let's ease up. If anything, things were just going to get worse. The older Friedrich got, the more pressure there was to finally turn him into the kind of man his father wanted, a soldier first and last. And every time Friedrich failed at that, punishment escalated. And at the same time, his world was shrinking because anyone he got close to was just removed, sent away. So one of the punishments was also to isolate him, and even the one family member who was closest to him and had always understood him had been taken away from him, Wilhelmine. As Friedrich grew older, the king began to see Wilhelmine not as a harmless daughter, but as part of the problem. She reinforced everything he despised in Friedrich. She kind of was this sensitive, intellectual girl. So he did what he always did when something threatened his control. He just removed it. At first, Wilhelmine was increasingly just kept away from her brother. They kind of had then all of a sudden different schedules, different households, and later different residences entirely. And the contact was restricted, conversations were monitored, letters were intercepted. And eventually, she was pushed toward a political marriage she didn't want. I mean, that was, the fate of so many of these children.
Of course.
But I think the biggest part was not just to secure an alliance here, but to break the sibling bond they had. And I think that's another reason why Katte's role became so intense so quickly.
It's such a nightmare scenario of what happens when your abuser actually does have absolute power.
Yeah.
In his relationship with Katte, it is one of those things where if you argue with me that they were definitely in love, okay, I believe you. If you argue with me that they desperately loved each other but weren't in love, okay, I believe you. Like, yeah. I could. Like you said, it doesn't really matter. They loved each other deeply, and whatever the nature of that love. So now it's the late 1720s, and Friedrich has no safe parent to go to, no daily contact with his beloved Wilhelmine, who's been taken from him, not a single friendship that's stable and enduring, and he is under constant surveillance. How on earth does anyone survive this kind of, and it's so wild to me that his father is constantly doing these things to him and then also saying to him, boy, if I were you, I'd just end things. I wouldn't want to be able to take this abuse I'm giving you.
That's the fucked up thing. Yes, to a degree, he probably didn't think he was super cruel or that it was necessary. But then on the other hand, he tells him, you know what, if I were you,
yeah,
I would have, and so he must know to a degree that this is so fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it doesn't come to a surprise to anyone that he was starting to think of getting the hell out of there. So Friedrich starts to form a plan to escape. Where to? Well, England, because, I don't know, part of his mother's side of the family is there. They're in charge, and it's far away, not on the main continent. I think that was kind of his reasoning there. So he has this plan, right? And then he tells his friend Katte about his plan. And Friedrich starts to talk about, should I go to England? Should I go to France? Whatever, he wants to get out. And Katte does not encourage this. In fact, he does the opposite. He warns him. He tells him, you know what, this is unrealistic. You are constantly being watched. You're the crown prince, first of all, so that's treason. Also, it's desertion. That's a serious crime. He doesn't think that's a good idea at all.
Right. There are some problems with the plan.
There's a lot of problems by doing this. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And Friedrich listens, but he doesn't back down. He's like, no, I gotta do this. And now Katte is in this impossible position because he's a guardsman, sworn to the king. But then there's Friedrich, it's not just a friend. He's also the crown prince. Loyalty runs both ways. And I think there's no version of this where Katte can get out of there in a good way.
No.
Like, this is a fucked up situation. And once Friedrich makes it clear that no matter what, he's going to try to escape. This is not just theorizing or, dreaming up some wannabe scenarios. Katte is trapped. He can't just walk away and leave Friedrich completely alone.
No.
By late summer of 1930, there's a plan. And it's not a good one. It's not a safe one. It's just a plan. Friedrich will try to use a military journey as cover. And England is the goal. And Katte doesn't believe this will end well at all, but he stays involved and he supports him. And I think this is where we're going to stop with this plan to escape.
Yeah, you're going to need to come back next week if you want to see how all of this ended. Spoiler alert, it's not good. It's
No.
No. It's all terrible, which is what we're here for.
It's not good, but do you have something good?
Oh, well, we're just back from our holidays, aren't we? So I guess it's just been super exciting to talk to you. I feel like we haven't talked in... What did you say when you answered the phone? It's been
84 years. No, because I think people don't... What we have to tell you is that last week's episode, the Edith Kativets episode, we recorded that way before Christmas.
That's right.
We had to get everything ready, and then my husband was here for almost 3 weeks. And
so good.
Yeah, so this is actually the first time we're talking on the phone.
That's right.
In weeks. Yeah. And usually we kind of have, well, we did have daily contact still, but just like, hey, how are you? Is everything okay?
Yeah, just checking in regularly to make sure. But yeah, this was the longest we've gone for a while without really talking. Yeah. So no, it's just nice. It's nice to catch up. It's nice to... It's my something good as well. Yeah, it was just good to have a break. It's good to be back. We're getting ready for our next Cinema Macabre series, which is His and Hers on Saturday. Netflix. Yeah, it's shaping up to be a real weird one. What is going... Well, we're going to talk about it.
What's going on? Who
are these people? So
like,
much.
Literally, I don't know. What am I don't know.
Well, we're going to find out. So that's been really fun. Yeah, it was just a nice holiday with family. I think we just are both getting back into life, back into reality now. Also, 3 days ago, this is something good. I had the clearest headed day that I have had in probably 5 years. On Monday, I felt so good. Now, did I get a migraine the next day that knocked me out completely and I couldn't do anything? Yes. But that Monday, I'll tell you what, I had like 5 really clear-headed hours on Monday, and it was super. How's Jam? How is Jam? Can you give us a tiny Jam update? I feel like it's been a while since I talked to you, but I don't think we've updated listeners.
That's true. For those of you who remember, Jam was diagnosed like 2 years ago with Lafora. After
Thanks
a lot of
to your
diligent
researching and trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I figured it out. But then also, like, just a couple of days later, one of our listeners, Doug, sent me an email and was like, you know what, you should look into Lafora. And I'm like, I just figured it out. But if it wouldn't have been that, he would have told me the right way to look.
That's right.
It's that, which is a degenerative neurological issue. And you can't do anything. It's slowly destroying his nerves. And for me, it was interesting when my husband was home because I see Jam every day, all day, right? And I noticed the smallest changes in him, and I know his bad days and his good days. But my husband sees him, like he didn't see him, he wasn't home for 4 months. And so I was like, when you come home, just tell me what you think. And Jam had really good days when my husband was here. I mean, he's shaking constantly. That's not going away. And then when snow was on the ground, he couldn't really walk. Like he started to kind of drag his feet and lift up his paws, and we had to carry him after a couple of meters. And I think, well, my husband said, and I think that's a really good point, you know how because of this disease, they get very sensitive to noise or to light, and I think also to the cold.
Right, yes.
Yeah, but other than that, he's doing really well. Under these circumstances, he's doing well. Everything is fine.
Good. That makes me happy. He's living his best life. He still has the most important thing is that he still has a very good quality of life.
Yeah, that's true.
And we just hope that he keeps on having that for many years to come.
Yeah.
Because I want to meet him. So that is good news. Good. And Leela's good. Opus and Bean are both fine. I need to post more videos of them. They're ridiculous, the pair of them.
I want to see more Opus and Beanie.
Oh my goodness. The two of them playing is just... It's just silly.
Like, I can't post too many videos of Jem and Leela because they're just lying around. Well, Jem is tippy-toeing around me and demanding things, and Leela is just lying around being lazy.
Yeah, that's what I wish my dogs were like. It's like they wait, and then as soon as Paul's car rolls down the driveway, they're like, it's on, like WrestleMania, like Bean leaps off the sofa on top of Opus, and it's on. And it's Bitey Face, and they're playing tug of war, and they're It's just, and it's fine. It's just that when the weather it's been way below freezing lately. So when it's really bitterly cold, like they go out, they do their business, they're right back in. Whereas if it's above freezing or around freezing, I'm saying freezing because, 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit is kind of an easy metric to measure, right? Like anything above freezing and I can put little coats on them and they'll happily be outside. But once it's below freezing, they're not interested. They want their heated bed, but they still need to play. And that's where not having a great room, like having a house. I have an old house, so no open concept anything, lots of little rooms. And that's when it's like, oh boy, it's like WWF SmackDown every day at my house.
Also, because it's a freezing around Christmas.
That's it.
It was muddy. It was so muddy. Like it was freezing before and then
mud.
The weather got kind of warmer and we just had mud.
Yep.
Mud and fog for 3 weeks. I didn't see sunlight for 3 or 4 weeks and it was all muddy all the time. And they just wanted to go outside, back in, outside, back in. And then they're all kind of super excited whenever we get into the house and I have to kind of clean them. But they don't stand still. No, they just run in circles around me.
They have to do a little dance when you get the towel out.
It's so exhausting. And you bend down to towel them off. And then you notice when you come in from the cold outside and your nose just gets all stuffy and you feel like you're suffocating slowly.
That's exactly right.
While you're wrestling your dogs.
Tippy tapping around. Yeah, Beanie spins in circles while I'm trying to get her little coat off of her. It was so funny. And I was like, well, at least the little one. And then a friend of mine was like, Annie, your little dog is still like 65 pounds. Like you're like, your tiny dog is still bigger than like it's a good Beanie. Yeah, she's like 60, 70 pounds. But it seems tiny compared to Opus.
Yeah.
She's only a little tiny baby until you try to pick her up and you're like, oh no, I can't.
All right. I think that's it.
That's it. That's it, everybody. If you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please do us a favor and leave us a rating or a review. And in fact, I saved one because sometimes it's really hard for me to find the ones from the UK. And I just sent one to Johanna because it was such a nice... This is such a nice...
I got so many nice messages lately.
I know. We got just such a nice... I'm not going to read the whole review because it's a long one. But the title is Tea Spittingly Wonderful, which we enjoy so much. And it's from Katniss44 in the UK, who says, I always learn so much and frequently regurgitate facts with far too much enthusiasm at inappropriate times. And score the title of the weird one. Yes, girl. Yes, one of us.
One of us. Gobble, gobble, one of us.
We got another one, Johanna.
If you want to support Fresh Hell directly, you can do that on Patreon. Over there you'll find bonus content, early access, cinema macabre, ad-free listening, assorted extra nonsense, the occasional live get-together. We have to plan that one for January. Let's see when we can do it. We have a lot of perfume talk.
We do. Oh, also for next month, I wonder, should we plan like a Galentine's?
Oh, I love that idea.
That'd be fun, right?
Maybe for all 3 tiers this time.
Oh, maybe.
As a special.
That would be really fun. Oh, February 13th is a Friday this year.
Oh, perfect.
So that would be fun. If anybody wants to hang out with us on the 13th, let us know. Otherwise, we'll pick a different February date. All right. You can find us online at freshhellpodcast.com. We are on the social media, Instagram, Facebook. We have a Facebook group. Shout out to everyone in the Facebook group. You're all amazing and wonderful. And we'll talk to you later because we're there. Yeah, come say hi.
Yeah. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Please tell your pets we said hi, hug them, cuddle them, treat them kindly, pay attention if they're acting weird. Be kind to your fellow human being and also be kind to yourself. And your children, be kind to your children.
That's right. That's right. And please remember to love the unloved. And as Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Choose.
Bye.
But be careful not to be, treasonous about it.
Don't be pushy. Bye, everybody.